Hello and welcome to Castar Reviews, and today we're starting up a new series of reviews. Just to preface, I'm not going to review every single Sonic game ever made because frankly I would go insane. I'm looking at the classic series here. The first 4 Sonic games are considered some of the best 2D platformers ever, but I wouldn't be too good of a reviewer if I just took that at face value, right? It is true that these games put Sega on equal footing as a rival to Nintendo and gave way to a monolithic video game franchise that still holds popularity. Which I get, I'm a fan of Sonic, but more for games like Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Generations. Going back to Sonic the Hedgehog, there's so many ways to play this first entry. You can get it on all major consoles if you don't feel like buying a Genesis, you can play it on your phone, which is the best version but more on that later, and you can even unlock Sonic 1 and Sonic Generations. As for this review, I'm going to be looking at the version released for the Xbox 360 and PS3 since I can't find a reliable way to capture on my phone without the audio sounding like shit. Anyway, without further ado, let's take a look at how Sonic 1 holds up almost 30 years later. As far as the story goes, there isn't much here, although that is par for the course for platformers of this era. In 1991, there weren't too many major franchises that put plot at the forefront. Anyhow, the story is that Dr. Robotnik, or Eggman in Japan, is putting woodland creatures into robots and Sonic wants to bring peace back to his forest home and save the animals. The classic theme of nature versus tech is laid on pretty thick here, and this plot can be seen as a social commentary of sorts. But I don't think that was the true intention of the story. For these older platformers and older games in general, the story was so far on the back burner that localization teams weren't even filled in on the plot that their Japanese coworkers came up with. How do you think we got Dr. Ivo Robotnik? Dr. Robotnik is something Sega of America came up with. In Japan, Dr. Eggman is Dr. Eggman. He's called Eggman now in modern games because Robotnik was retconned into his name by the time Sonic Adventure came out. So here I'm sticking with Eggman. Moving on to the story at hand, after destroying the Mad Doctor's creations at the end of each zone, you face off against him at the end of Scrap Brain Zone in a surprisingly easy boss fight, but I guess that was just because I knew the pattern. Even still, he gets away and that ends the adventure. If you gathered all the Chaos Emeralds, then it shows Sonic restoring peace and life to Green Hill Zone, which is nice. The story isn't much to write home about, but the gameplay and presentation certainly are. The graphical quality of the Sega Genesis is shown off really well here. You see right when you boot up the game and are thrown into Green Hill Zone. The bright environments, the catchy as fuck music, and the speed. Oh my god, the speed. How can I have gone this long in the video without mentioning Sonic's main characteristic? The thing that sets the Blue Blur apart from its main rival was that Sonic was faster. You had loops, slopes, and tunnels that give players a fun sense of adrenaline. There was also strategy involved. You can't go fast whenever you want, at least not yet. Everything in Sonic 1 is momentum based. If you wanted to go through that loop, you needed a running start. The levels you're traveling through are pretty solid as well, with some notable exceptions. I feel like the levels might not actually be in the right order when difficulty is considered. Green Hill is a great starter level that gives you a great feel for the physics engine, but then things come to a screeching halt in Marble Zone where you wait for slow moving blocks. Springyard Zone brings back the sense of speed with higher difficulty, and Labyrinth Zone's underwater platforming is just awful. Sonic needs to continuously get air bubbles to survive underwater, which adds another layer of difficulty to the slowdown-ridden, trap-infested level. But then Starlight Zone is a walk in the park, and Scrap Brain Zone is just hard enough for a final level, except for the third act. Act 3 of Scrap Brain Zone is terrible. It's just a reskin of Labyrinth Zone with less air bubbles. So I'm theorizing here that Labyrinth could easily be the second to last zone or last one. Although when doing research, I saw that Labyrinth Zone was initially going to be the second level of the game. What the fuck? Imagine you're a 10 and under kid. You just get Sonic the Hedgehog for Christmas or Hanukkah, and you can't even make it past the second level of the game. It's better off that they shuffled the levels around, but I still think that the difficulty curve is out of whack. Back to the graphics for a second, they look amazing. I love how the color palette of the Genesis is used to make detailed environments. Also, the level design itself is pretty good with some exceptions in Scrap Brain Zone and Labyrinth Zone. The fun thing about Sonic games is there are multiple pathways one can take that can either lead to an easier way to complete an act or power-ups. This sort of design adds a ton to replayability, and makes exploring levels pretty fun. The sprite design for Sonic and Eggman is pretty good, and the enemy design is varied enough to give players reason to use all of Sonic's moves. The music, as stated previously, is catchy as fuck. Personally, Green Hill Zone and Scrap Brain Zone are my favorites from Sonic 1, but there really isn't a bad song in this bunch. Moving on to the main gameplay here, Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the most simple control schemes I've seen in a platformer. At least on the Xbox 360 version, use the left stick to move and the A button to jump. That's it. The cool thing about the control is that it feels like Sonic has analog movement even though the Genesis controller was made years before analog sticks were standard on consoles. Each zone is segmented into 3 acts with a boss fight against Eggman waiting for you at the end of the third. Sonic can collect rings which can be used for scoring at the end of the level or health. If he takes one hit from either an enemy or environmental hazard, he loses all of his rings. If he gets hit with no rings, he loses a life. Rings also serve a third purpose. Getting 100 gives Sonic an extra life, and finishing an act with at least 50 and jumping through a giant ring at the end of the stage grants access to special stages. These trippy mazes are used to get Chaos Emeralds, which are used to get the best ending in the game. This is sort of where my problems with the game start. First of all, getting 50 rings by the end of a stage is fucking hard considering how much bullshit can come your way, especially late game. But also, the special stages themselves are ridiculous. It's hard to control where you're going throughout them, and there's about a 50% chance that you'll be launched into the exit by a random bounce. Not only that, but if you fail once, then there's no option to retry. You just have to do the 50 ring thing all over again next act. So there are minimal opportunities to get the emeralds, and it's hard to get them all in one playthrough. Surely there must be a great reward for working so hard to get all 6, right? Fuck no! The best ending is all you get! Thankfully, special stages aren't mandatory to beat the game. But if you do want that best ending, you gotta go through some shit. Back to the simple act of getting 50 rings for a second here. I have no idea why Sonic's sprite is centered on the screen while going through levels. It makes it pretty hard to see what's in front of you, and in some zones discourages you from going fast. But that's only a problem if you're going for the best ending. If you're going for any ending at all, you still need to beat the game starting out with only 3 lives and no continues. As previously stated, you can get extra lives by collecting 100 rings. But you want to know where your continues are? Special stages. Thank God that most updated releases of Sonic 1 have a save feature because Sonic 1 is a game that is pretty hard to beat in one sitting. This is the kind of difficulty balancing that annoys the crap out of me. Save features and passwords have been a thing since the late 80s, and Super Mario Bros. 3, which released 2 years before Sonic 1, had unlimited continues. I can theorize limited continues were put in place to artificially lengthen game time, but that's not a great excuse. That's why if you want to play Sonic 1, buy one of the re-releases, especially the one on Android or iOS. Those versions have save features, and the phone version sports a 16:9 aspect ratio. How rare is that? The mobile version being the best version of a console game. In summary, Sonic 1 has its flaws, no doubt, but I feel like no game was without flaws. I still enjoyed my time playing it and would play it again. I would highly recommend getting the phone versions as well, because that's the definitive version of Sonic 1. Next time, you guessed it, we're taking a look at Sonic 2, which also got a re-release for modern consoles. Thank you for watching this episode of Castar Reviews. Subscribe for more content from me, follow me on Twitter for production updates, and stay safe out there.